ones that I'm really interested in, what got me interested in this field was actually prion diseases. And I talked about it a little bit earlier, but they're a really, really interesting group of diseases because they do all of the things that we think about when we think about disease. So they can be acquired. So you can eat something that is tainted with a prion disease and get a prion disease yourself. They can be sporadic, so they can literally just happen to any random person, and they can be hereditary or genetic. And I think that is crazy because I don't think there's any other diseases out there that can do that. And they're completely 100% fatal. There is no cure. There is no way to treat it. You cannot get rid of a prion. So the prion protein is a normally occurring protein in your brain. It just doesn't really, we don't really know what its function is normally, but it ends up misfolding, and that misfolding conformation of the protein causes the disease. And that form of the protein is called the scrapey form of the prion protein. And it affects other animals, which is even more insane. So you can get it. So a cow can get a prion disease, and you can eat that cow, and then you can get a prion disease, and it's different than the prion disease that the cow had. And so it's transmissible amongst species. And I think it is one of the most underappreciated diseases out there, in my opinion. I just think they're so fascinating. And there's no cure, and there's nothing you can do. And you have it, and you have, like, depending on the disease, like a year to 2 years max, and that's it. And there's no treatment. There's palliative care, maybe, and that's it.
So you said mad cow is one of those, right?
Yes.
What are some other examples of prion diseases?
Yeah, so you have scrapey in sheep. That's the original one that was first described. In humans, you have Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. You also have GSS, which is another variant of that. And then you have FFI, fatal familial insomnia. That's a hereditary version. There's actually a family, I'm reading a book on this right now. There's a family in Italy that everybody in their family gets the disease, or it's like 50-50 chance. So like every generation they have so many people in the family. So they're trying to figure out that genetic link. And that one's really fascinating because unlike the other ones, people actually stop sleeping. That's the disease. They end up staying awake. Their body cannot go to sleep. And they literally die from lack of sleep.
Okay, hold on. How does that, do you know anything about how that works?
I think it has something to do with damage to the thalamus, which regulates your body's like ability to have like homeostasis. So I think that's what it is. I don't know a ton about it. I'm still reading up, but I just think that's wild. That's literally what happens. Like they just stop sleeping and they go crazy.
No, and see, that goes back to the sleep argument. Why do we sleep? I mean, it's obviously for regeneration and things like that. But then why do you dream on top of that? And it's like, and the fact that there's a disease that can cause people to stop sleeping and it's genetic. Can you catch that? Probably not, right?
I don't know, not FFI, but other ones you can, like Creutzfeldt-Jakob, they have a variant version that is acquired. So it's not necessarily catch, it's more acquired. You have to eat something that's tainted with it, or they think that, and I don't know how well this is researched, but like if someone passes away or has a prion disease and they do like surgery or an autopsy and then use those tools on like another patient, it's thought that you could transmit it that way through like surgical tools. So a lot of times if an individual has a prion disease and has a surgery or something like that, they'll just throw away those tools. So there's that. There's also like chronic wasting disease is a big one that people need to be concerned about because it affects like deer and other species that we would hunt. So like elk and things like that. So that's always a really big concern because if there's an animal that has chronic wasting disease and you shoot it and you eat it, you can develop a prion disease as well. So I think that's crazy. And I think there's some feline forms. So cats, there was like an ostrich that had a prion disease. I don't know how well reported that is, but.
What is that one in the deer that you were saying? What is that disease? How does it affect humans? What is it?
Yeah, so chronic wasting disease, it's essentially a prion disease that affects deer and elk and things in that kind of family of animals. And it affects them kind of the same way that humans do. So the buildup of this misfolded protein causes the breakdown of the brain and other systems, and they die from that. I don't necessarily know the clinical symptoms that they would have it because they're deer and they wouldn't talk to us, but I don't hunt, so I don't know if it's obvious from looking at them. Probably. So I know with sheep who get scrapey, they actually, it's called scrapey because they would scrape themselves against a fence, like they had kind of an imaginary itch, and they would literally scrape all of their skin off of their body trying to itch, and they would scrape and scrape and scrape until they literally died from scraping themselves so much or getting an infection or something like that. So I imagine that if chronic wasting disease, I think they waste away, and so they look really, really, really sick. That's what I think is the symptom, but I don't know the actual like clinical what the deer would experience.
And so how do we know how these animals get these prion diseases? Are they genetic, or do they have to eat something?
I think a lot of times it's just sporadic. I know in sheep, the story that I'm reading about in the book, I think it was from inbreeding. So they would have one that would like sporadically get a prion disease, and then they would continue to breed it with other sheep. And then I think it became genetic that way. But there are human instances where it's actually acquired. There was a disease in a specific population of people that's now, the disease itself is extinct, but it was called Kuru. And it was essentially a population of, it was a cannibalistic ritual to eat individuals that passed away. And I think what happened was there was maybe a spontaneous occurrence of the disease, and then the individual would pass away. They would eat parts of the individual's organs, particularly the brain, as part of their like funeral religious rites. And then that would cause the next person who ate that brain or the next couple people to acquire this disease. And it kept going because they kept doing that, not knowing that it was causing this disease that was killing all of them, simply by participating in this funeral rite.
So